if I'm Maurice, I try to get Lomberg in any way I can because the Bruins hate playing against
I was going
him.
to say the Bruins hate that guy.
Yeah, so I think that I would be
it.
surprised if we don't see both of those guys in the lineup before long here. I know that neither one is big, but they both punch above their weight.
Yeah, they do. And Lomberg likes to give chokeholds in the bottom of piles too.
That's it's going to get Frederick off. And
yep.
you know, that's going to be Maurice he's masterful. He's going to try anything in this series to figure it out. I do think that they're facing a harder coach now.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 89th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Join up for a premium membership. You get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent directly to your inbox via newsletter. I also am writing daily during the playoffs for the Boston Sports Journal at bostonsportsjournal.com. During the season, I'm writing columns after games, but we're getting stuff up there every single day right now during the postseason. So check that out. Today, I have my longtime friend and colleague, Mick Colageo. Mick, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Well, every Sunday, I post a column for BostonHockeyNow.com. And I have a blog called Rink Wrap that I link to on X and sometimes Facebook, but that's become glitchy for me for some reason. But this week, I have this blog that's going to be mammoth, and it's going to be about my overlook of Stanley Cup teams in history and how they're built, what the foundational architecture is of those teams from a roster standpoint, because there are commonalities. So those things, and also about the idea that the Stanley Cup is not a roulette wheel. Teams win for a reason, and the teams that win it always are back within a few years before or after. Check it out.
That's great, Mick. I love it. I'm sure that's going to be really interesting. One thing I've found that all of those teams have, or pretty much all those teams have, is a horse, legit, true number one defenseman in the prime of his career that plays huge minutes, plays in all situations, can play 25 to 30 minutes. That is something it seems like it's prerequisite in this day and age to have, like a Norris Trophy caliber defenseman. Have you found that in your research?
I was of a belief. I remember going on with Mike Felger back in the day and telling him that in order to win the Stanley Cup, you have to have a defenseman that can improvise the transition. Who can improvise the transition? Otherwise, you can't win it. And he was like, "Oh, I love this. This is great." He's all excited that I was telling him something like this that sort of made hockey simple for him. And I was pretty proud of myself. And then the Bruins went and won the Stanley Cup. Okay, who was their defenseman in 11 who could improvise the transition? Then who it was? It was Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. And that's why their point totals never matched the league leaders, because those guys came back all the way, 2/3 of every game they played. Those two guys were their PMD. And they pretty much had to do that glue work in the back end in order for them. And the rest of the time, the Bruins pretty much just tried to hold serve.
See, that's why I would argue, I guess, that sometimes you can get by without having that guy in the back end, because sometimes you have good enough centers where they can kind of do that.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
well, the Bruins had that widget. They just didn't have it from an offensive standpoint. Their guy was an defensive.
It was transporting the puck up the ice. Absolutely. But like that team, to what we're talking about, Zdeno Chara was a Norris Trophy defenseman at that point.
He was that guy.
An absolute horse.
Guy that I thought it needed to be. He was a different kind of a guy.
Yep.
For that purpose, but he was that guy on that team. Carolina Hurricanes 2006 is a tougher one. You have a lot of balance back there. Aaron Ward, ice time was very high, but what was he on the Bruins a few years later?
Yep.
So
that might have been that team that you mentioned, the Hurricanes. I think that might have been the one team when I went back and looked at like a 10 or a 15-year period. I think that was the only team that didn't really have a clear cut, like number one kind of guy like that.
2 years earlier, the year before the lockout, you would have to identify Dan Boyle as that guy.
Yeah.
On the Lightning, although they sort of did it a little bit by committee too, because they had some other guys who were pretty good in those roles and were pretty sturdy too. So Boyle went on to have a career that a little like Morgan Riley's, I'd say, and so he was sort of that guy on that team. And
but more recently, I think I did it all the way back to when the lockout struck out the whole year, so I didn't go further back into when Tampa Bay won. But in recent years, like Cale Makar, Victor Hedman, like you go through all of the Stanley Cup winners.
Yeah, in the cap era.
Every single one of them has a guy like that, and it's really a prerequisite to winning the cup at this point. And when I was banging the drum about that, it was towards the end of the Zdeno Chara era when he was kind of out of his prime, and they needed to find that next guy, which obviously Charlie McAvoy is sometimes at this point. But we're going to get into that during the show. But
I know. You're throwing us right at the big McAvoy controversy.
Let me get to the sponsors.
Talk about.
Let me get to the sponsors real. Yes, let me get to the sponsors real quick, and we'll get into that. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And let's also thank Game Time. This is taking the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets during the playoffs. If you want to hop on the Celtics bandwagon, Game Time, the app is a great way to get playoff tickets, last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all this stuff. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, and it's super easy to use the app and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Mick. 6-1 Bruins loss in Game 2. We had talked in the podcast. I believe it was after Game 1. I definitely talked a lot about this the last couple of days. I fully thought that Game 1 looked to me like a Florida Panthers team that had taken a week off, that hadn't played in a week, that was rusty, that was not themselves. The Bruins took full advantage, so full credit to them for doing that. But you got the sense that Game 1 was going to be a little bit of an aberrational sort of game from the rest of the series.
It usually is in any series. It definitely was in this one.
Oh yeah, and you know, we've seen that a lot. We've seen many times in the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, the Bruins have playoff series where they win Game 1 and then it's a different series after that, not in a good way. We've seen that against Tampa. We've seen that against a couple other teams, and this feels like one of those series where it's going to be much more competitive now after these first couple of games, and you know, halfway through that game, it was hard to tell whether it was fatigue that was creating the breakout issues and allowing Florida to forecheck the crap out of the Bruins, or if it was just last year playing out all over again, where they're just going to have a lot of difficulty getting the puck out of their own end, and they're going to be under duress and under heavy pressure all the time from the Florida Panthers, because we saw that from about halfway through Game 2 on, they were just really struggling to get the puck out of the zone, and it was similar to the worst parts of last year's first-round series.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so easy to play. I can make my Celtic picks and make my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals and easy gameplay and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Celtics and NBA fans, you can get in on Prize Picks in 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. On Prize Picks this week, I'm selecting Jason Tatum to dish out more than 5 assists and his teammate Jaylen Brown to have more than 22.5 points. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
Your thoughts on just the overall sort of arc of the series so far through 2 games and what you're anticipating in Game 3?
All right, Game 1, agreed, and I would add that the Bruins in Game 1 were running on adrenaline.
Yeah, they were.
Game 2, about halfway through the first period, they were Wile E. Coyote about 100 feet off the edge of the cliff and then finally looked down. And I think that was fatigue. And I do think fatigue with Florida's desperation, the combination of those two factors, I think took the game in the direction that it did, and it turned
Yep.
into a Florida power play for the rest of the game. And I'd say on top of that, despite the fatigue, I'm really impressed with how the Bruins took no crap.
Yes,
And
I
they
agree.
were a team heretofore that took crap. And they didn't take crap in that game, which I thought was a fantastic way to, sure, let the score go to 18-1. Who cares? But they sent the message that they weren't going to back down. And I think that's gigantic. From the Florida standpoint, the big thing for me is they were able to turn around that game without Sam Bennett. To me, Sam Bennett is the heartbeat of that team. What Tkachuk can do from a usefulness standpoint is usually stands on the shoulders of the physicality that Bennett provides. He bores the holes, and Tkachuk goes in there like the engineer and says, "Okay, here's what we're going to do in the tunnel." And so I feel like in this game, Florida really was able to do all that without Bennett. Now, granted, again, the Bruins were out on their feet and they couldn't get it back. They knew it. There was nothing they could do about it, but they also weren't going to go down swinging. And for that,
and that game too, to your point, that was all Barkov and Reinhart. Like those two demolished.
And Barkov needed to be right without Bennett in the lineup. Barkov really had to have a big game, and he did.
He did.
Because they're a team, and this goes back to my roster architecture blog coming this week. They're not a big three team, what the Bruins now are. The Bruins used to be a 2 number 1 center team, which we alluded to. This is a 2 number 1 center team. And to me, Barkov had to have a huge game, and he responded. And to me, that was the key to Florida's offensive surge to Barkov to be Barkov, who's just a beast of a player when he's motivated.
Yeah, he was a beast around the net. Like he wreaked a lot of havoc around the net. That goal where he beat McAvoy to the puck and scored was huge, and that was really a statement play and a statement goal. And it's it's more than once in these playoffs where Florida's best or the opposition's best has beat Boston's best, as far as one of their players making a play on the Bruins' best defenseman. And Charlie McAvoy has been kind of back and forth in these playoffs. I think he's alternated good and bad games. I think that speaks to how difficult the playoffs are for a guy like that has got a lot on his shoulders, that is being a workhorse and has a lot on his plate that he's trying to get done, and playing in a lot of situations, and playing the physical role against the other team while also being expected to do all of these different things. And he's going to get physically pounded by the other team, and he's going to be a target as well. And I think what we see, because of the way he plays, because of how much he plays, because of how much the Bruins rely on him, that he tends to wear down in some of these games and make mistakes. And I think we've seen that. And I think game 2, as much as anybody else, perhaps more than anybody else, he was sort of the poster boy for that fatigue and for that hitting a wall. And like, he just did not look good in game 2. And you need him obviously to bounce back in game 3 and be better for the balance of the series.
Well, 2 things on this. One, the Florida Panthers will hit everything and everybody and try to discourage puck possession.
Yep.
But this will become, just because McAvoy will be the top of that list, this will become every series of his career, he's been targeted for missile hits. And it's mainly it was Domi and Bertuzzi in games in the Toronto series. It's happened in series in the past. I remember Palmieri going after him in 21. Svechnikov obviously took out Lindholm in 22. But the missile hits on Boston's top defenseman really a key component in this era to any other team's recipe for success. And they're going to continue going after McAvoy and try to break him down. That's their goal. That's their plan.
Yep.
One reason I didn't think the Bruins were going to beat the Maple Leafs before the series started was because I didn't see enough forecheck out of them to think that they could do that to Morgan Riley. And at the end of the series, they found a way to be 1 goal better than they were. And that having been said, that element in McAvoy's career is, I think, dependent on a stable a partner who offers a measure of physicality that takes some of the burden of that part of it off of McAvoy's shoulders, so he doesn't have to be Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer at the
Right.
same time. And I
Right.
feel like in his career, he's had to be both players. And I feel like although Lowry is now emerging as the guy who's going to play with McAvoy going forward, I'm not sure it's going to pay off in the long run for the Bruins to take a guy whose accent is on puck moving, and McAvoy will take care of the physical end of the game, as much as it would have been if he had a Chara type, if that's possible to call him a type. But just a guy who would be more stalwart and allow McAvoy to be the puck skater that he can be without feeling like I'm going to get out of position or I'm going to get worn down because everybody's hitting me and I don't have
Yeah.
a guy here who can hit with them. I don't know. I like how Lowry has played. I think it's amazing what he's accomplished this year from the start of the season to the end with all the ups and downs from Providence. So right now it makes sense. It looks good, but and so I think that game 2 is also an aberration. So I think these two games coming up in Boston beginning tonight are going to be the ones that really tell us about this series. I think both game 1 and 2 have asterisks on them, and this
Yeah.
is really the best of 5.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why I think game 3 is going to be pivotal and very interesting tonight, because it's going to tell you which way the wind is really blowing in this series after those first couple of games. To your point about the pairings and partners and all that, like if you wanted a steadier sort of guy that could hold his end of the bargain physically for McAvoy, I think Hampus Lindholm would be the better choice. If you wanted to put a pairing together like that, that would help, I think, McAvoy quite a bit to be playing with somebody else who can do everything like he can. Maybe not to the degree that he can, but almost as well. The problem becomes with a team like Florida is they can spread out their talent.
Right. Then does Lowry can't play with Carlo in that
right,
next pairing, I don't think, and be reliable. I think that that's too much to ask of him.
right.
And it probably if you did a super pairing, you probably would need to elevate Wotherspoon, or you can't do Forbort because there's not enough mobility there. But you'd have to elevate Wotherspoon to Carlo's partner and say, okay, are we going to get through our shifts all right here? I don't think they like that. They've never really gone to it, so I don't think that's happening. So I think that we're pretty much looking at what you're going to have for the Bruins defense. It's going to be how well can McAvoy weather it, and can we have some forwards step in the way of some of these guys? I
Yes,
mean, we have a
slowing them
little bit
down.
more, throw a little bit more in the way of getting in the way. I
Well,
mean,
I
there's
was going to ask you that, Mick. Like, what do you think? Do you think that the Bruins can do anything against this forecheck and change anything that they're doing to have a little more success with it? Because I just think, what we saw in game 2, that I don't think that's aberrational as far as the Florida forecheck giving the Bruins trouble. And once they really got going and sort of pinned their ears back and came after them, that it was going to be a bit of a problem. And I think it's going to be like that during the series. The question becomes, what do the Bruins do to have more success against that? What do they do to combat that a little bit and offset it? Because, even Toronto was giving the Bruins trouble with the forecheck at times when they were surprisingly, because nobody expected them to do it, really coming at them hard on the forecheck and making them struggle to get out of the zone. I mean, I think this is the book now on this Bruins team. Is part of the way that you beat them is you just forecheck the crap out of them and really make the defensemen have a hard time getting out of the zone and force them to make mistakes in their own end and sort of self-destruct on themselves in their own zone.
I asked Kevin Shattenkirk before the season if he ever had played this system, and he said no. But the thing he noticed right away during training camp is that it's hard for the Bruins to get to their puck possession system when other teams are rimming it hard around the boards. And that's what the Panthers did so well over the second half of the series last year, because they know the Bruins play a tight zone in their own end when the opponents have the puck. They want the forwards to be the ones who are going out to the perimeters and challenging. You will see a defenseman dart to the corner if he can recover his spot right away if he doesn't get it. So you will see some, and I thought that this year, because there were so many copycats in the early season to that system of trying to get the puck in Boston zone and rim it hard around the boards and get the Bruins into a thing with their turnstiles, and they're not really chasing, but that way a team gets to establish possession and cycle until they discovers the Bruins to the point that it's like running a power play. Now the Bruins go into a box and now you have a chance to make a play. That's what, Florida did so well in the playoffs last year. That's what a lot of copycat teams try to do early this past season, the regular season. And I thought that Monty did some tweaking that helped me have confidence that they were going to be able to get through some of this, because they started getting a little more liberal and with their system of letting people dart out of it in order to make sure they recover position if necessary, that they're covered if they don't, and that they can still win some pucks on the half wall. I think that this series will be won or lost by the wingers that are stationed at the half wall for the Bruins outlet passes.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to use McAvoy, Lowry, Lindholm to skate the puck more out of the zone, because the passing options are covered so well, and their wingers tend not to win these battles. They did not win 50-50s against Toronto with enough frequency to make me think they can do it against Florida.
No.
So they got to do something different. And maybe their belief is that Lowry's skating of the puck and his ability to improvise under stress, coolly make move plays with the puck, will be their best chance of getting through all this. And from a physical standpoint, he's handled pretty well what's come at him so far. So I think that that's how they're going to roll this dice. And I think it gives them a better chance from a back end personnel standpoint than last year's scenario did.
I agree to a point about Lowry, definitely. And I think Toronto started to recognize that towards the end of the series, that he was becoming good. He's becoming a factor because he could skate the puck out on his own and, make crafty plays. And he was making good passes when he did finally get out of the zone. And he's a good defenseman when it comes to all that stuff and getting through the forecheck. And I noticed they were coming after him later in the series physically and really targeting him. And I would expect Florida's going to do the same thing, because they're going to see the same thing, where he's a difference maker with the way he can move the puck and the way he can get it out of the zone. And obviously you become a target as a defenseman when you can become a factor like that. So I think that's going to be something interesting to watch.
That Rodriguez has turned into a little pill, former BU, right?
Yep.
And he's keeping Lomberg out of that lineup. If I'm Maurice, I try to get Lomberg in any way I can, because the Bruins hate playing against him.
I was going to say the Bruins hate that guy.
Yeah, so I think I would be surprised if we don't see both of those guys in the lineup before long here. I know that neither one is big, but they both punch above their weight.
Yeah, they do. And Lomberg likes to give chokeholds in the bottom of piles too.
It's going to get Frederick off. And that's going to be, Maurice he's masterful. He's going to try anything in this series to figure it out. I do think that they're facing a harder coach now.
You getting excited about the Boston Celtics? Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the entire band of Celtics players looking like they have what it takes. Even if Porzingis is hurt every once in a while and has to miss a few games, they look like they're going to put a blowtorch through the Eastern Conference and have a lot of exciting games. If you want to get in on the action, go to Game Time. It's an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. If you need to check out the website, check out gametime.co to see what it's all about. But there's lowest ticket price guarantees, event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, job loss assurance, on-time ticket delivery. Game Time Ticket loves their fans, and they're committed to ensuring you have an outstanding experience with them. So why not go and see what Game Time is all about? You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find and buy MLB tickets in addition to the NBA playoffs for every kind of event in the arenas. Views from all seats in the venue, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, all of that stuff. Game Time is an app worth checking out. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download it. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time.
Speaking of Maurice, I loved his reaction and Montgomery's after game 2 because they were both so appreciative of the moment between Pasternak and Tkachuk, and Maurice was basically like, "You can hate me if you want for loving that. I really don't care. Like that's playoff hockey, that kind of a thing." Um, and I loved, and we talked about it a little bit. I loved the Bruins' response in game 2 when it was out of hand and out of control. Is they just decided as a team we're not going to take their crap and we're going to go right at them and we're just going to turn this into a gong show in the third period. And if they start throwing us out, who cares? Like we're making a statement and we're already moving on to game 3 and making a statement about being ready for that game. And then at the end, after, a lot of the Bruins tough guys, their tough customers had already been tossed. Maroon was gone. McAvoy was gone. Marchand was gone. Trent Frederick was gone. All those guys were gone. That's when Captain Braveheart, Matthew Tkachuk, decides he's going to challenge the Bruins bench and he's going to start talking smack to David Pastrnak and he's going to start chirping their bench when all the big brother types are already gone from the Bruins bench. And Pastrnak decides he's going to step up and fight him. And Pastrnak knows he's going to lose that fight. He knows that Tkachuk that's more his arena than Pasternak's, and he knows that he's probably going in there and going to take a punch or two. But he didn't care. He was going to make a statement to everybody. And I think that kind of thing brings a room together, brings an entire team together, and makes him an even a better leader as far as I'm concerned. That's one of the bigger leadership things. I've seen more leadership stuff out of Pastrnak in these playoffs, especially the last few games, than you saw in a long time. And it's as much walking the walk as talking the talk. And I think he's walking the walk right now, which you absolutely have to do in the postseason.
I think that when he did what he did, that made me start considering the possibility that the Bruins will win the series.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's one thing to say that we won't be deterred, we're going to play our game. It's another thing to actually go out there and say, hit me.
Yep.
That was exciting. And I also, my only regret for that situation from a Boston standpoint is that Jack Edwards wasn't on the call.
Yeah.
I would love to have heard Jack Edwards. I would love to have been at his house to hear him off the air for that situation. I mean, because really, for
Nesson should have an Edwards. Nesson should have an Edwards cast, like the Manning cast for the football games, and just have him somewhere, like talking about the game as it's going on.
Because Tkachuk's profile was rising in the league a few years back when he was still with Calgary. People are thinking of him as a power forward. I think in that series against LA, I remember one shift he hit Drew Doughty like 3 times. And I was really thinking, wow, boy, wouldn't it be nice if the Bruins had a guy like this? Well, now it turns out that he's not that player. He's a player Marchand thumped him early in the game. Hell of a hit.
Yep.
A legal hit and just absolutely rocked him. And Tkachuk tried to get cute carrying the puck and Marchand put him down. And you know what? For Tkachuk to go after Pastrnak, my tweet was, who's next? Zacha?
Right.
This is embarrassing.
He's opportunistic, tough guy. That's what he is.
He's an opportunistic player. He's a great opportunist, as you showed in the playoffs last year with the overtime goals that he scored, turning chaos into results for his team. Terrific in those regards. For him to do what he's doing here, he thinks it's going to help the Panthers. I think he's helping the Bruins when he does that.
To a degree. I think he is definitely helping them to a degree. I would say the one thing I would say is that the Bruins can't get so caught up in like trying to take his head off in game 3 or going after him in game 3 that they get out of what they're doing. They start taking penalties, because that's, I think, what Tkachuk ultimately wants to do is he wants you to get into the penalty box. He wants to get you out of your game, make you lose composure.
Well, if he's trading off with McAvoy, that's one thing. But the thing is, be smart and have people to take him out and cancel him out who are below him in their Boston lineup. You know? Right. And if not him, do it to somebody else.
Correct.
Go get absolutely. There is no decorum in the playoffs. None.
Yep.
It's a wasteland of morality. It's absolutely, this is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to ethics. This is when Ulf Samuelsson takes out Cam Neely's knee.
No, it's
This is
dog eat
when
dog, Mick.
Gasparitis will do the same thing.
It's
You
dog
know,
eat dog. The most ruthless team is the one that's going to win. The one that's
and
willing
the
to do
Bruins have
anything and go above and beyond to win, get the result, and move on is the one that's going to win. And that's always the way it is.
and the Bruins have had too many Lady Bing contenders
Yeah.
over the last several years,
Yep.
and it's time for them to, put on some brass knuckles and go take. This is, you win the Stanley Cup. You like the
Well,
Warriors trying to get home.
Mick, I can tell you right now, and you're going to love to hear this. Lady Bing went to the quiet room in the third period of Game 2 in Florida. The Lady Bing was nowhere to be found because the Bruins were not acting gentlemanly in any way, shape, or form, and that's exactly what you wanted to see. They just decided that one shift with Trent Frederick's line going out there, they were just going to cause chaos and go punch Florida in the face, and that's exactly what they did. And it turned into everybody getting 10-minute misconducts and getting thrown out. And it's, that was a statement. That was a statement by the Bruins that they're going to push back and they're going to do what they didn't do last year. And that's why I agree with you. Between that and between the Pasternak fight, I do think this is going to be, probably a 7-game series now. And it is going to go
special. Yeah.
And it is going to go to the end because I think the Bruins are willing to push back and they're willing to fight fire with fire. And
the only thing I don't like about the scenario, and you can't do anything about it now because the only choice is to do what they're doing. But for the Bruins to play that game, it's a little bit out of their DNA. For Florida to play that game, it's right down the middle of their DNA. It's a perfect strike. So I think that from the Bruins standpoint, it's how they have to play. I don't know that it ultimately puts them in a position to win, but I do think that it gives them their best chance.
Mick, I think they're going to have to play that way if they want to win in the playoffs, and they have to get comfortable playing that way, and they have to make it a club. Hold on, let me finish. They have to make it a club that's in their bag. They have to be able to do that and do it with aplomb and do it with enthusiasm and do it well. If they're going to win in the playoffs, they have to have that attitude. They have to have that.
As Vegas did last year.
They have to be willing to push back. And I think that was a sign in the third period of Game 2 that they are becoming comfortable doing that. And that they now know with experience, because a lot of these guys are younger guys that had to develop that playoff experience. They're starting to realize that you have to become uncomfortable and do those uncomfortable things if you want to win in the postseason. And I think they're getting comfortable being uncomfortable and doing those uncomfortable things. And I think it's the maturation of this team that we're seeing. And now, do I think that means they're going to win the Stanley Cup this year? No. Do I even think that means they're going to win this series with the Florida Panthers? Not necessarily, but I do think they're going to win their share of games in the series, and I think they're going to push it to the end, and it's going to be a very competitive series. I don't think there's going to be a 5-gamer where Game 1's an aberration and Florida's just going to roll over them in the next 4 games because of what I saw at the end of Game 2. I think they're in it for the long haul in this series, and it's going to be a battle.
I think that's probably the proper outlook, and I can imagine. The older I get, the more I can imagine any scenario. But every scenario comes with some sort of reason when it's over, and even if they did not win another game in the series, they're all going to be hard fought. They're not going away. This is the most character and grit I've seen out of a Bruins team in Don Sweeney's era as GM. And I think that I would have trended the roster at the deadline with the opportunities that were there more in this direction to be more equipped for this situation, because I feel like this is always the difference between them winning and losing in the playoffs in this era. And the less is more Bruins have a shot here, and I'm glad that they're really putting their best foot forward. I'm happy for them as a room full of good guys that deserve to experience some success. Really happy for Marchand that he gets to experience some success as captain, win a series, maybe win another. Let's see what they can do with a centennial season of a depleted roster. They've done an awful lot out of this group of players.
Yeah, no doubt. And across the board, and like we mentioned, Pasternak's having some sort of iconic playoff moments, identifying playoff moments where there weren't a ton before this, where he's stepped up and sort of shown why he's a star. And, he's had some good games against Toronto in the past where he hat tricks, whatever. But I think some of the things that he's doing now, stepping up and scoring a goal in overtime, dropping the gloves with Kachuk, he's starting to have the real star moments in the playoffs that you need out of your best players if you're going to have success. And if you're going to be a superstar in the league, you need to have these kind of iconic moments in the postseason.
And I think those are the finishing touches to the cake that he built all season. I just feel like he's been a better player this year than the one who scored 61 goals and became only the second Bruin ever to reach that mark. This year, he's managed to the end of periods better. He's managed the end of his shifts better. He's been a better tired player, smarter with the puck when he's run out of gas. He's just been all around. He's been more physical. He's just really evolved into the player that it seemed like it's possible he could become. I was always wondering when he was young, is this guy going to be more, Pavel Bure, or is he going to be more Jaromir Jagr? And because he was a guy who is flimsy, but he also seemed to have an ability to make plays and hold the puck and protect the puck without having blinding speed. And we've really seen him become his own player, his own version of this, which is really exciting. And to watch him develop into the player that he is, which is really, it's his own brand. It's nobody else quite like him. And it's been a joy to watch this season. And I don't care if he didn't score 17 goals. I think he's been amazing this year.
Yeah, definitely. All right. This is the last subject we're going to get into on this podcast, the last main subject. And it was interesting. Bruins had availability. They did not practice on Thursday. They had availability at Hanscom when they landed from Florida. In these playoffs, they've been staying overnight in the cities and coming home the next day and not practicing, which I think is interesting. A little different maybe than what they've traditionally done in the past. But Montgomery was asked about the too many men on the ice penalties yesterday. And they now have 5 and 9 games during the playoffs. He got snippy a little bit. You could see he was uncomfortable being asked the questions. And then finally, after he answered 2 questions, he basically said, I'm not going to answer any more questions about this, which he doesn't do very often. And this is what he said. It's good to set records. That's a positive, right? And he was being sarcastic when he was presented with the situation that they might set an NHL record for too many men in the ice penalties in the playoffs. He said, I take full responsibility. I have to be clearer and I have to be louder. And if I have to start grabbing people's pants so they don't jump when they shouldn't, I'll start doing that. All of us together, the communication, the receiving of the communication needs to be better. Last night, there was no excuse for it. I'd like to say that it's easy to solve with our group, but it's different players at different moments. Sometimes it's that a guy is coming to change and then stops and goes back out there, and the guy watching the change has to make sure he comes to the bench while watching where the puck is. The last 2, it was guys jumping where they're not even supposed to be the one going on the ice. So that's why I say that it's clear that it is my responsibility to make things better in those areas. And he also mentioned that they've had more in the playoffs than they had during the regular season, which is not true. They had 8 too many men in the ice penalties during the regular season. I thought it was double digits. It was close, but they had some bad too many men in the ice penalties during the regular season as well. And they had a bunch last year too. Like, this is not a new problem, a new issue. This has happened quite a bit during the 2 years that Jim Montgomery's been the coach of the Bruins. So I think it is a problem area, and it's something they need to figure out. Because sure as bleep, Mick, that this is going to come back and haunt them at a really bad point in these playoffs. Like, they're going to get one at the worst possible time, and it's going to be Don Cherry style against the Canadians, and it's going to end up, being on the epitaph of the season if they don't straighten it out. So, any thoughts on this? Because this seems like, as somebody that does have to hold on to the pants of players as a peewee coach to make sure they're not jumping on the ice before the other kid gets to the bench. And make sure they're going out at the right time when they're supposed to. Like, maybe you do need to do that at the NHL level with some of these guys, is to lasso them so they don't go out there on their own. I also wonder how many of these are Jake DeBrusk, where he's going out there and not really like paying attention to what's going on, or has no real grasp of what's happening. Because I know he's done that at least once or twice this season and gotten the look from Montgomery when it's happened. So any thoughts you have on these too many men in the ice penalties?
One is that a couple of the changes that were more deliberate on the fly really opened up the weak side for the opponent to make passes to stationed wingers at the blue line, was somebody trying to hum hard through the middle of the rink to be the guy who collects the relay for that and gets an odd man. And the Bruins have faced Swayman's turned away a couple of odd mans because
as a result of changes,
situations where the Bruins were trying to make sure they didn't make this screw up.
Yep.
So they wound up getting to the weak side of the ice really late in the game. I think the other thing to watch for is that the textbook play is when the Bruins are having this kind of problem is shoot the puck at their bench.
Well, yeah, of course.
Every middle of every change, every wholesale they do, fire the puck at their bench. Dennis Weidman is the only player I've ever seen shoot the puck at his own bench during a change. But he was capable of amazing things, positive and negative.
Speaking of a guy that makes some brain dead plays, Dennis Weidman was definitely one of those guys.
He was just he could thread the needle from 150 feet, but he could also do something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and then he was with Calgary, finished that hit on the linesman. That was hilarious. So I mean,
one other thing, Mick, I would say about this is I think part of the reason we're seeing it more too now is because of matchups in the playoffs and the coaches wanting to get certain matchups when other guys get thrown on the boards on the other side. And part of it is because Montgomery does so much mixing of the lines and changing the line combinations up so much and throwing different people out there that I think it's always going to happen to some degree just based on the constant tinkering that Montgomery does with his forward combinations.
The Joel Quenneville of the 2020s. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching the Blackhawks during their sweet spot and trying to chart their lines on a sports writer's notepad one night. And I think I had about 17 two-man competitions before I saw one of them 3 times in a row. It's just he would just very rarely give you a line shot like you presented before a pro or college game and actually stick to it. They just didn't, rarely did they ever do that. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think the matchups is a great comment by you. And I think that that's probably something the Bruins have to decide to make sure that they're matched up in a way that they can survive what's happening next and not go Mo Larry the cheese over anything they don't like in an effort to get the right player out there. If he's not out there cleanly, then it's like not being out there. It's better to have the other guy out there. So, so there's a few things there.
There are, but either way, if it's because of some of the things that Montgomery's doing, because it's the playoffs, he just needs to come up with a system where this isn't happening. You know what I mean? You need as a coach to figure out a communication system, something on the bench, responsibility to one of your assistants, delegate it to somebody else if you have to, if there's too much going on. Somebody needs to be in charge of that not happening and making sure there's a system in place where it's not happening and the players know what's going on and like changes are being like relayed to everybody so everybody's on the same page. And I know it's chaotic on a bench during a game and there's a lot that happens, especially if you're changing things around.
But every team does this, and Monty's been coaching in the NHL for a while.
Exactly.
Stars. So it's not as if we're talking about a guy who this is like, he's a total mess when it comes to this stuff. It's more like the Bruins have just reached a glitchy standpoint here, and that they were good. The next point is Maurice is probably studying film and thinking, how can we exploit this, and how can we cause them more consternation with whatever adjustments they're likely to make. So they're always way ahead of where I am observing anything like this and figuring out how it's going to go down. But I think that I think the one thing I don't like is when the Bruins are doing wholesales and they're leaving that weak side. So
giving up an offensive chance.
I think they're relying too much on the goalie for those in these playoffs on that front.
Yes, I agree. But it's all part of the same thing. Like if it's bad changes, if it's too many men on the ice, there's an issue there that needs to be remedied. And it like I said before, this isn't like this just started happening. They had 8 too many men in the ice penalties during the year. That's way too many. I'm sure they were one of the leaders in the league as far as too many men in the ice penalties went.
I wonder too how much it has to do with the fact that they've had so much personnel in and out of their lineup. Maybe not as much by injury, but as much by ups and downs. Guys, veteran out, Providence rookie up and in. and then we're going to tweak the lines. You're going to change the bottom six, and this guy's going to. So it's like 3 lines minimum would be affected by any
Yeah.
of these tweaks. And so the Bruins.
The one thing I can tell you, Mick, is that going through the regular season and looking all these up, is that poor Oscar Steen had to spend the 2 minutes in the box for a lot of these too many men in the ice penalties. That poor bastard. So he did his time in the box.
Looking down on the near boards, number 62. Yep.
Whether it was his fault or not, he was going to be in the box for 2 minutes when it was all said and done.
That'll be his legacy. Give that kid a ring if they win it.
That's right. Tweet of the week: Red Dog Horizon. If the Bruins aren't fired up for the rest of the series, they never will be. They really need to go after Florida's stars hard. I think Game 3 will be much better, and I think that, you and I have covered that and definitely agree with that. And I think that's the sentiment here, is that I think Game 3 is going to be a war, and I think it's going to be for battle control of the tempo of this series, the footprint of this series, and just the will of this series, and which team. I think it's going to be a battle of wills between these two teams tonight. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch. Let's thank our sponsors real quick. Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn out $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey entries, baseball today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick Connor McDavid and Jude Bellingham and Mookie Betts, whatever you want to do, all in the same entry. It's fun and easy. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. It's last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats. So terms do apply, though, but create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Mick, thank you very much. Let's enjoy Game 3 at the Garden tonight, shall we?
It'd be great.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you at the rink.